Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. You are here with the BioLogos Integrate team, and we're going to be talking about helping students get their hands dirty with caring for creation. And we're really excited about this conversation. So thank you for joining us. Before we jump in, I wanted to share with you just a quick little intro about BioLogos in case you're unfamiliar with our work, and then we will launch into today's conversation. So, BioLogos is a science and faith nonprofit where we seek to explore God's word and God's world to inspire authentic faith for today. We just really believe that God gave us both his scriptures and the incredible natural world that he's created, both of which help us to understand who he is, learn about him, worship him, and even serve him through our understanding of the natural world and our care for it. So we love to talk about anything that falls at the intersection of science and faith, and we seek to do that in living out our three core values of Christ-centered faith, rigorous science, and gracious dialogue at the heart of all of that. So if you're interested in learning more about our organization and seeing more of our resources, you can check out the website biologos.org. We were founded by this guy, Francis Collins, and he's also worth learning about because he's a cool dude. But for now, let's jump in to talking a little bit about creation care. And to start us off, we have a short little video from BioLogos that is just a quick, brief primer into how we as an organization think about the environment and the climate and our role as Christians in caring for it. So I think this will be a helpful way to start our conversation.
God has placed us in a wondrous world. From the depths of the oceans to the canopies of the rainforests, from blooming gardens to majestic glaciers, we are surrounded by the beauty and majesty of all God has made. What's more, we understand God has called us to care for creation. But if we're honest, we also understand we have, in large part, failed to actually answer this call. We must confront the small and big ways we've neglected creation, admit we've disregarded it, and be honest about the harmful results of our actions to the planet and the people who live there. And then we must answer the call, understanding our concern for creation as a renewed expression of our faith. We care for creation because of our love for others. We recognize that our actions have a direct impact on others in the world. Our contributions to the global climate crisis, for example, may speed the advent of food shortages around the globe, and in so doing, place us in conflict with Jesus' admonition to feed others in his name. What's more, we care for creation because of our love for God. Put simply, God made the earth and left it in our care. Why confess we love God and then disregard what God has made? Instead, let our love be seen by the way we care for all God has called good. And ultimately, we care for creation encouraged by our hope for the future. Though the outlook is grim, we still believe Jesus is making all things new. And so we have hope that our efforts on behalf of creation are not in vain. Imagine what will happen when the church commits itself to being part of the solution. Imagine what it will look like when we work together to use less, to reuse more, to travel, work, and live in ways that are more conscious of the footprints we leave. Affecting real change will not be easy, but that does not mean we should not try. God has truly placed us in a wondrous world. May we now live in gratitude for it and to preserve and protect it for all God's children.
All right. I love that video. Well,
God has placed us in a wondrous world.
Maybe? There we go. All right. Today, we are going to be talking about helping students get their hands dirty with caring for creation. And our guest has done just that in a wide variety of ways. Maureen Wise has worked to restore polluted streams, helped institutions of higher education become greener, taught college sustainability courses, written articles, devotions, and even novels about sustainability and creation. Personally, I'm a little bit intrigued by these creation care novels. I'll have to look into that. So welcome, Maureen.
Hello.
Hi. Well, it is so great to have you here. You've been a friend of BioLogos for a long time, and we're excited to chat with you a little bit about this topic of creation care in general, and particularly how we can get our students more involved in caring for the world around them. So when I think about this, part of the reason why we picked this topic today is because it's April, and this Saturday is Earth Day. But I'm guessing that for many Christians, Earth Day is probably going to come and go this weekend without any reference to it in their church. In fact, polling by the Pew Research group shows that 82% of evangelical Protestants do not hear about climate change and that sort of thing discussed in their churches almost at all, which is not very surprising when you keep in mind that 66% of evangelicals don't think that climate change is a serious problem. So I guess the first question to start with is there a connection between Christianity and caring for the environment?
Right. So, right at the very beginning of the Bible, right after the creation story, God put Adam in the garden, and we're looking at Genesis 2:15, and if you look at all the different versions of that Bible verse, God is telling Adam to take care of the land. So like in this one, it's to work it and take care of the Garden of Eden, to tend and watch over it, to cultivate it and tend it, to farm it and take care of it, to work the ground and keep it in order. So definitely take care of the land, right? Like very much God wants Adam to be right there and caring for the land. So that's like the very first mandate that God gave Adam. And so this is the first, oh yeah, go ahead, Faith.
Yeah, so we get this sort of mandate in Genesis to care for creation. And I think probably a lot of us are familiar with that. And that's the thing that comes to our mind when we think about caring for the earth as Christians is Genesis saying, tend to the land. And that's super important. But does caring for the environment come up anywhere else in the Bible?
So I can think of lots of Bible verses where God is telling us to take care of other people and to take care of the world and to like not harm each other. So this first one is love your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself, right? So loving your neighbor is definitely taking care of the earth where the other people live, right? And then another verse we have, go ahead. This one is, as I have loved you, you must love one another. So the same thing, taking care of each other. And as we know, a lot of people are affected by climate change, and their land is, maybe either flooding or in a drought. So taking care of the land definitely has a big deal with that. And then in this one, in everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words of Jesus himself. It is more blessed to give than to receive. So taking care of other people is more blessed than to receive. And then love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. Again, taking care of, sorry, my computer is making noise. Taking care of other people, taking care of your neighbor, not harming them and harming the land where they live.
Yeah.
So those are the few verses that we called out. There's so many more. But it's clear that God has told us to take care of each other, our neighbors, and climate change is affecting people in lots of different places in the world negatively. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's easy to sort of look around at our daily lives and say like, oh, I don't notice anything particularly different. Maybe we had a few bigger storms than usual this year, and it kind of feels like, with climate change in particular, it might be hard to see the personal effects in our lives on a daily basis. And then, the environment has so much more than just climate change. It's pollution and the loss of biodiversity and all sorts of things. And I don't think we always realize that the impacts of those things, but especially climate change, the reality is that those impacts are going to be much bigger on basically not Americans, on people in the southern half of the world, in more underdeveloped areas, and those people are our brothers and sisters that we are called to love. And so by caring for the environment, we're also loving others as God has called us to, for sure. When I think about this, I also think about the Old Testament, that in addition to Jesus's call to love people, there's so much stuff in there in even in the Old Covenant and the Old Law about Sabbath keeping, and that in the Sabbath commandment, they actually include that your animals, specifically your working animals like oxen, should rest and take, sort of treat your animals with dignity. The Jubilee laws, every 50th year, you're supposed to give the ground a break from sowing and reaping, which turns out is like really good agricultural process, in addition to giving you a break from your farming labor. And so much more, that this idea of living at peace, not just with ourselves and with God and with others, but with the world, with the creation, is a really big theme, I think, in the Old Testament as well. And so you pair that with Jesus's call to love each other and this overarching mandate to care for the world, and I think there's a really compelling case that this is something that we as Christians should be really engaged in. Yeah. So as we're talking about creation care, like I said, this is something that BioLogos in particular cares a lot about. And so when we were making our Integrate curriculum, this was definitely one of the topics that we wanted to emphasize. So I wanted to share with you just a quick little bit about the Integrate curriculum itself, and specifically about what we call our creation care bundle. So if you're not familiar, our Integrate curriculum is a science and faith supplement that's intended for Christian teachers, or teachers in Christian high schools or Christian home educators, so that they can take the science curriculum that they're already using that might have really great science, but doesn't have that faith connection piece. And they can use this to bring in conversations about how we engage our faith and our theology with the science that we're learning. So the curriculum covers all sorts of topics, from science and faith in general to human biology like genetics and neurodiversity and DNA technology, also origins questions like evolution. And then this last big theme is creation care. So that's what I wanted to focus in on. And you can look at this in general, but the big idea is that our goal with Integrate is that we want your students' faith to be enriched by their exploration of God's world, so that science class becomes an avenue for really faith formation and learning, coming to know God and worship God and even serve God more fully through science in particular, in addition to the other disciplines. So here's our creation care bundle. It's got 4 units in it. The whole curriculum is 15 units, but these 4 are set aside as a creation care bundle. And the idea is to draw students into this idea of stewardship of creation, both because of that Genesis mandate and, as Maureen was saying, because of this call to love our neighbors and better understanding how caring for creation really is a way that we care for our human neighbors, and also for other organisms, for plants and animals that are precious creations of God as well, and are beautiful and worthy of dignity in themselves, and also as important parts of our ecosystems that we rely on. So Unit 12, Study God's Creation with a Posture of Wonder and Worship. It's all about just what we at BioLogos call awe and wonder, that you can look out in the natural world and gosh, it's incredible. And it really draws you to worship of God, just to see the incredible beauty of flowers and the diversity of different bird species. I have a number of colleagues here who are really into birding, which is a new thing for me. And gosh, there are a lot of different types of birds out there. It's actually kind of fun to walk around with them and quiz them on what's that one, what's that one. As someone with an astronomy background, I'm particularly fond of looking at the universe and how that just expands our understanding of who God is and his power and glory. So this unit kind of focuses on that experience of seeing God in nature, and also explores this idea of miracles a little bit. Is that if we are Christians who take science seriously, what do we do with miracles, and how do we process that? The next unit, chapter 13, digs into this idea that Maureen brought up about caring for people and caring for our planet. That when we engage with caring for our planet, that we really are not just serving the planet, but primarily serving other people and those that are around us. So like every one of our Integrate units, it includes a profile of some Christian who's engaged in this topic. In this case, it's an urban farmer, Jason Adkins, which is a really interesting mix of, you think of farming out in the middle of nowhere, but he's doing this farming work in an urban setting and really bringing people and students into conversation about where our food comes from and how we can care for the land while also providing food for others. It also has a devotional Bible study, like all of the units do, on a virtue that's relevant to this topic. In this case, it's gentleness. So this one's got a lot of stuff like that, including opportunities to get involved in a local ecological restoration project and other things like that. The next unit is 14, Climate Change in Our Commission. So this zeroes in on specifically that climate change piece, looking at some of the evidence for where this idea of not only the climate changing, but humans' role within that comes from. We talked to Katharine Hayhoe, who is an extraordinary climate scientist, deep Christian believer, and really helps to kind of pull those pieces together about how Christians can engage with this topic. So lots of cool stuff there. This unit in particular has some fun data analysis that, as a science teacher, I really appreciate, looking at carbon emission or carbon dioxide abundances in the atmosphere and how those have changed over time and how that works, which I think is a really great lesson. And then lastly, Unit 15 is biodiversity and conservation. So this focuses a little bit more on those non-human elements of plants and animals and the way that changing climate and environmental harms are affecting other species, and why it's important to care for them because they are God's creation as well, and what that can look like in our own communities. So those are the four units that make up our Creation Care bundle. They each kind of take a different piece of the pie, but we're really excited about them. So that's a little bit about Integrate in our Creation Care bundle. Maureen, you actually had the opportunity to do some of those activities in your own house with your son, and we'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah. So I am currently a part-time college professor, so I'm not at like a Christian college or anything. So I was not able to like teach my students about this. And I also am not a homeschool parent, but I have a middle school son that we went through the devotions and watched some of the videos, and he really enjoyed them. And then we really focused on the the Unit 12 Wonder devotion. And I was telling Faith that we have this all-purpose trail 2 doors down from our house. Like there's one house between our house and the trail, and yeah, we have some pictures of it. So It goes, and it's the Cleveland Metro Parks Trail, so I'm sure Dana knows all about that. And it's like miles and miles long, and literally every day someone in our family is running or walking. Or I was saying, this is where my son learned where to ride his bike. He's been skateboarding and scootering. We've been on this trail in the heat, after a snowstorm, during a really crazy snowstorm, during a hailstorm, in the rain. Like, this is the trail that we are on all the time. But we took special time where we decided we're going to really think about God and wonder at creation on this super familiar trail. And we feel like we reflected on the attributes of God that inspire and awe us as Christians. So looking at like you see this down tree that was apparently rotting and the Metro Parks cut up, and my son like very frequently would like walk across that. Looking at that and thinking about how that tree is like rotting and providing more nutrients, and now a home for different bugs than if it was up in the and standing upright. It was really interesting to like really consider everything that we see every day and think of it in a really different way. And so it was a really wonderful thing to do, and we definitely enjoyed that devotion. And I will say that going through all the material, I was super impressed, and I kind of wanted to do some homeschooling with my son over the summer with it. But he is in early middle school, like 5th grade, so it's a little young for him. But it's a really wonderful curriculum.
Yeah, so that that nature walk is part of the sort of devotional part of Unit 12 that leads you to some scripture reflection on seeing God's wonder in creation, and then has this encouragement and gives you a little bit of structure to just go out into the natural world. And you don't. Maureen is incredibly blessed to have this lovely trail right by her park. She was sending me pictures, and I was like, this looks amazing.
Yeah, so many pictures with faces in bed. Wow.
But even if even if you don't live in an area that has something that purely natural nearby, it's amazing the natural world that you can find just in your neighborhood, even if it's just weeds pushing up between the cracks of the sidewalk, and how you can find the beauty and richness of God's creation wherever you look, if you're actually looking. So that's awesome. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the curriculum and how it can be used. And there's lots of other examples of how you as a teacher or a parent can get your student involved and actively participating in caring for creation embedded within the curriculum. But I thought this would be a great opportunity with Earth Day coming to pick Maureen's brain about some great ways that anyone, regardless of using the curriculum, can really get, and particularly get their students involved in this work. And I think that's hard sometimes, because when we think about creation care, at least for me, the things that come to my mind are big and overwhelming, like climate change and pollution and deforestation and a giant island of water bottles somewhere out in the Pacific. Like, these are things that are way bigger than an individual can take on by themselves. And so it can feel daunting and overwhelming. And teachers are starting to talk about the climate anxiety that their students are having, that they see the effects of, they see what a big problem this is, but they feel helpless to do anything about it. And so one of the reasons we're excited to have Maureen here is to hear about some ideas of little steps that we can take in our lives and with our students to start getting them engaged with this, that feel approachable and realistic within the classroom or within the home setting. So Maureen, I know you came up with a bit of a list. What sort of how do we start doing this with our students, with our kids?
So we were saying that you can't care for creation until you care about creation, right? So we really want the kids, students, to get outside and experience nature, and also to be thinking about the resources we use and how we're using them. So I kind of went a little nuts and came up with like more than 20 ideas of, and I'm sure everyone can add to them too, ideas of how to get um, middle school, high school, homeschool kids, maybe just your own kid that is not homeschooled or in high school yet, like mine. Um, so we've got a big list, but one of the things that I think is really important is to help kids understand that food doesn't magically just show up at the grocery store, right? So getting them to grow some food, or at least understand who grows the food, and like high schoolers usually hopefully get this right. And I will say that my college students don't always, but so getting them to the farmer's market where you're like talking to a farmer and how they'll know where they're growing and how they're growing, or being part of a community supported agriculture program where you're supporting local farmers is really wonderful to help kids think about where food comes from. And then when you're thinking about food, thinking about how meat is harder on the land than plant-based stuff like vegetables and beans and tofu that's made from beans or stuff like that. So considering instituting a meatless Monday, or just meatless lunch or something, is really wonderful to help kids to think about what kind of protein you can eat in addition to meat. And then something else that I think is really important is to think about waste management and to do a waste audit, to like literally dig in your trash and pull out everything with some gloves maybe, and put like a tarp down and say, gosh, this could have been recycled and we should have recycled this, or oh gosh, we could have composted this, right? So like actually looking at what you throw away and then thinking about what can we maybe use instead of like a reusable substitute instead of what's in the trash there. And also really understanding what you can recycle in your community is really important. Like in my community, you cannot recycle berry clamshells, which is super sad because we all love berries, but you can't recycle those in our community. So it's really hard to throw them away, but you have to, right? Like putting stuff in the recycling that should not be there is messing up how the recycling works. So you need to not wish cycle and just put stuff that you
Wish
want
cycle? Is that a term? Wish cycle?
Definitely, yes.
I love that. I'm
Yeah.
probably very guilty of that.
Yeah, right. And hoping that someone else will figure it out is not the way to do it, because there's not usually individual people picking stuff out. It's usually machines, and then they have to put a bunch of stuff in the trash, and it's not the best. So I was trying to say, and I feel like I'm being really long about doing a waste audit, but then also considering your waste, how you can reduce it, and so forth. But then also, yeah, and totally go on a recycling a trip to your recycling center or your material recovery facility is wonderful. And I've been to ours, and it was very eye-opening for sure.
The thing that I love about this waste audit idea as a teacher is that it's not just sort of finger wagging, like trash goes to landfills and that's bad, and so you should recycle, and here's this very prescriptive, like what you should do. It's just a very hands-on, like tangible, visceral, like let's dig through our trash and think about, like it's so easy to just throw something in the trash and think that it's gone and not your problem anymore. And so when you dig through it again, we just are really into this waste audit thing today. You are sort of confronted with the waste that you produce. And some of it you can say like, yeah, there was nothing else I could have done with that, but throw it away.
And like, how many paper towels are in there, right? Like, could I really be using a rag instead of a paper towels, or paper napkins? I could be using cloth napkins.
Yeah.
And I've done this with college students when I used to work at sustainability departments. They would help us do this, and they were always just so blown away and really left feeling like they needed to better understand what could be recycled and how to reduce their waste. It was really good.
Yeah, I think that can be great in a school setting or homeschool setting. Yeah. By the way, I'll just mention here that Maureen's rattling off a couple of ideas, but don't worry if you miss something, or don't feel like you need to be writing it down, we've got a lovely handout all prepared for you with these ideas and many more that we'll share at the end of the
Yeah, I like threw a bunch of stuff into a Word doc and all of a sudden it became this pretty handout. So yeah, I was in awe of that. So in thinking about audits, I really think doing an energy audit at your home or school is important too. And you can like hire someone, or like my electricity company came out and did an energy audit at our house, and you could call your company and they might do one for you. But they had like special, like this thing where you could see the heat signatures, and that was crazy. I should have like shared a picture of, he took a picture of me and my son when he was there. But you can do an energy audit. It's much less complicated, where you just go around your classroom or your house and just say, this thing that's plugged in, does it need to be plugged in? Is it using electricity when it's turned off? Should we maybe unplug it? You know, like literally, like electric toothbrushes do not need to be plugged in all the time. They can sit for an entire week and don't need charge, and they can just charge overnight, and then you don't need to have them plugged in the rest of the time. Or like, do you really need your electric drill charging all the time? Like, how often do you really use that drill? Does it really need to be charging? So that sort of thing, like thinking about how often you really use stuff and how much energy they're using. And then also, can you swap out light bulbs? And kids, I think especially little kids, love to like say, certainly an incandescent uses a lot less or more energy than a CFL or a LED, which we definitely want to be switching to LEDs, and little kids would love to help swap them all out. And then seeing how many light bulbs you use is really interesting. Okay, so the next thing, and sorry, I feel like I'm just like babbling so much.
Oh, you're fine. One of my favorites on your list is this idea of just going outside and identifying plants and animals. Can you tell us a little bit about those apps that you recommend that allow you to do this well?
So getting kids outside, sometimes you don't know what to do once you're out there, right? Like you're like, okay, so here's some nature and we don't really know what are we looking at. And giving the name to things can be very interesting. And like maybe looking at more information about that name can be kind of empowering. So iNaturalist is like a citizen science app where you observe, and you're supposed to take more than one picture, like a close-up and like a faraway picture, and then a naturalist, a scientist will and then you when you take the observation, you make like a guess, and then a naturalist or a scientist will then go in and say, yes, that is what that is, or no, you're wrong, that is not what that is. And they might use this in their scientific study to say, oh yeah, this is when the flowers are blooming here, but we didn't expect them to be blooming at that time. Or this, like for some reason we found a water snake in our backyard last week and we don't have water near us, so somebody will use that information somewhere. So iNaturalist is, and I make my college students use this and make 25 observations for a semester, is a wonderful app. But then Seek is through iNaturalist, and it's kind of geared towards younger kids because it just gives you a guess. Like you don't have to guess it, and it kind of like you sit there for a second and it'll guess for you. So that's kind of more easier, like in the now. And then the Merlin Bird ID, Faith, I'm sorry, I'm not a birder and I don't use this app as nearly as much, but you know, your friends perhaps do, or perhaps they just
The
know everything.
birders all talk about Merlin a lot.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So it's one too that you can use. And
Yeah.
you know, sometimes kids are like, they don't want to let go of their technology, but if you're like, here, use this app for in nature, they'll enjoy it a little more.
Yeah.
But if you like can prepare scavenger hunts or plan, like I had an idea of planning multiple different places to go, and like having, like looking forward to that, and having like maybe make a trip of it, like for homeschool kids a little more than necessarily traditionally like kids in schools. But like going to multiple different places where it's like a different ecosystem can be really interesting. Like going to a wetland, or like just like a prairie or field can, and a forest can be, like we have all of those in Ohio, but they're really different ecosystems, and seeing what the different things that live there can be really cool. Or certainly if you're like near a beach or like the desert or something like that.
Yeah, exploring different ecosystems can be really interesting. I only just moved here to BioLogos headquarters sounds very official. We're in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was coming from California, and when I lived in California, I hadn't intentionally sought out to like know local species, but you just figure it out. I mean, redwood trees like kind of stand out, and then there's the palm trees, and there's lots of rosemary and lavender around. Like you just kind of get to know the local plants and animals. And has actually been really fun for me in Michigan to use iNaturalist as a way to get to know my local ecosystem. And so I annoy my husband because every time we're like out on a walk, I'm like, wait, I need to take a picture of this thing to, figure out what kind of flower this is. And it's made, my son is only 2, so he's not quite engaging it with me, but it's been really fun to be in our backyard, and spring is happening, and it's a new house to us. So we don't I don't know what's planted back there. And so things keep springing up in my backyard, and I run out to take pictures to figure out what it is. And like, that's a trout lily, and that's trillium. And this is something called a Lenten rose, which is lovely. So, that's been really fun for me personally. And things that I thought just looked like weeds or just kind of whatever, wasn't paying attention, suddenly they're much more engaging. So I've really enjoyed using that as an app, and you can do so much with that educationally, with getting students out in their local area and observing just what they see around themselves. Yeah.
So the last one I want to share, Dana will know all about this as well. Dana and I used to work together in watershed work, by the way. So US EPA's Know Your Watershed website, you can put in your zip code or your city or something else, and your watershed will come up on a map. And just so everyone knows, every speck of land is part of a watershed, right? So you definitely live in a watershed. And my college students, I'm trying so hard to get them to understand that, where I don't know why in 7th grade they were supposed to learn this, but they don't know that. Like, they're like, oh, when I went out in the watershed. And I'm like, no, you're in a watershed right now, right? They're always like, oh, when we were out in nature in the watershed. I'm like, nope, CSU is in a watershed. We are all in a watershed. So learning what your watershed is, again, like giving the name to something, is really like empowering, and like learning what that water body is. CSU is actually related to the Lake Erie watershed. There's not like a creek right there, but like the Doan Brook is right next to us. And knowing what that water body is, and like how polluted it is, how it's polluted, who's working on it. That US EPA site gives you like what kind of grants it's gotten, and like who's working to, like, how they're restoring it in some places, is really cool to learn. And then going and visiting that water body when you know that is also a really cool thing to do. And certainly there's frequently a citizens activist group or somebody working to restore water bodies, and you can somehow get involved with them. I personally kind of hate, litter cleanups, but like a beach cleanup could be fun. But if you want to do a litter cleanup, you could, that sort of thing. There's other things to do, but
there's so many things. I'm going to show, this is the handout. We just shared it in the chat for you to download, and we will include it in an email follow-up. So don't feel like you need to read or screenshot this. But this is the list that Maureen came up with. And this is not exhaustive by any stretch, but it is a great place to start. And almost all of these have resources linked in them. So here's that watershed one. This link will take you to that watershed site. And I think it's so cool that I learned a lot helping put this together about how many local resources there are, about learning about your local watershed or your local flood map, or local recycling programs and that sort of thing. The Department of Energy and the Department of Agriculture and some of these other both sort of federal agencies and local nonprofits have really incredible resources to learn about your community. And I think that local element is really, really important. I think it was Cal DeWitt that said something to the effect of like, you can't fix something that you don't love, and you can't love something that you don't know. And so sort of the first step in caring for the environment, particularly literally in your backyard, is just getting out there and knowing it, and exposing yourself and putting a name to things and building some attachment to this world that God has put us in. And so these are just a handful of ideas and resources to kind of get you started on thinking about how to do that well. So thank you, Maureen, for putting that together. Now would be a great time, if you haven't already, if you have any questions for Maureen about any of those activities, that sort of thing, we would love to spend a little bit of time doing Q&A right now. So feel free to stay muted. We'll put do Q&A all through the chat. So feel free to put those in the chat, either sent to everybody or just directly to BioLogos there. To get us started, Maureen, our first one here says, let's see. Do you have any, just kind of a general one, do you have any favorite books or podcast recommendations for someone who's interested in learning more about creation care, for someone that this is kind of a new topic for?
So you guys mentioned Katharine Hayhoe during the Integrate. Oh, I kind of meant to have the book here to show. It's like right over there, but I'm not going to get it. Katharine Hayhoe wrote a book called Saving Us, I think it is. Yes.
Yes.
And it has so many statistics about climate change and so many little stories about climate change. And I'm not usually a nonfiction reader. Like I really stick to the cozy mysteries myself. And I did read the whole thing with no problem. It was lovely. And her big takeaway was to like talk to other people about climate change. And I thought that was that's the most important thing to do. And I thought that was super empowering. And also like, not everyone has to have solar panels on their house. You can, if you want, that'd be wonderful. But talking about it and like doing your best is really the most important thing to do. So that one's a book that I always recommend. A podcast that I personally listen to is The Climavores. I should have like had that link ready. It's like it's like Eating for a Changing Planet, and they talk about like what's the best food, let's actually argue about it, like how what you eat impacts the world. So I like that.
Food piece is a huge one, because we think of food specifically in the context of our personal physical health. And it's been eye-opening for me to learn about the environmental impacts for good or for ill of various farming and meat production practices. So I think that's a really interesting one for sure. I know for me, something that I've enjoyed getting into recently is native species. You go to a nursery, a garden store in your local neighborhood, and there's all of these beautiful flowers and plants, and they're lovely. But it's been really interesting for me to learn about the role of what organisms, what species naturally occur within your given community, and the important role that those play in the ecosystem. And when you bring in what they often call exotic plants, the impact that can have on the local butterfly or insect and bee populations that might only be capable of eating and sort of getting nutrition from certain native species and that sort of thing. So for me recently, I finished reading Doug Tallamy's book. I should remember. I think it's called Bringing Nature Home. and about bringing doing native species in your yard, and that like your yard, whether it's a patio or a front step with a pot or a expansive yard full of grass, is such a great way to help and promote and improve the biodiversity in your local neighborhoods, and can be really exciting. I know, Maureen, you've talked about how it can be a little tricky to find native
Really?
species.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I found that if I ask my local nursery to order things, like not go to Lowe's or Home Depot, but like if I want a milkweed, a specific milkweed or like a specific thing, I kind of made buddies with my local nursery guy and he will special order the native species for me, which is annoying. And it's really annoying that that's what you have to do, you know? But
Mhm.
that's what I have to do anyway. And I mean, I'm in Ohio, so I have a very similar ecosystem than you do, Faith.
Yeah.
But yeah. And sorry, I didn't realize you had already put the Catherine Hayhoe book in them.
Oh, no, that's great. Your link is much more concise than mine. So
Well, I was trying not to be like you have to buy it from Amazon. You know, I was trying to be a little more.
that's
Uh,
no, that's good. That's good of you. Another question here. Any ideas on how to specifically incorporate creation care and engagement in our
right,
churches?
Dana. Okay, so I was on the tip of my mouse thinking of resources to give here. So I write a lot of articles for, okay, not a lot. I write articles for Science for the Church. And I just did one this week, which I am super excited about, that if you don't mind, I'd love to share.
Please.
It's about food waste and what I think Jesus said about food waste. But they have a really great website or a like list of things that I'm not finding super quickly. But let me just look for it real quick.
We
And
can also, any resources that you want to look up later, we can send out to folks in the follow-up
Mhm,
email.
mhm,
Science in the Church, Science for the Church and the Church. I always forget. Is a really great organization that BioLogos works with a lot, that is trying to do exactly that, of bringing science into the church in various different ways. So I know they've got some resources available, but I think the great thing is that there we go, alarm going off on my phone. A lot of things that you would do with students or at home can probably be adapted into a church setting as well. And maybe the youth groups are a potential way to bring that into your church community, like having your youth group do an energy audit of the church building, and report back to the elder board about ways that they could improve their energy usage, which is great financially for a church, and a really practical way to help live better. And so sort of, I know our church, the one that I go to, has a team committee for creation care specifically. And so they're just a group of people who have volunteered to make that a priority within our church, and do things like plant native species in our parking lots, and keep an eye on our energy consumption, and suggest other ways for the church to get involved. So while I'll see if Maureen has more sort of church specific ideas. I think a lot of things that you could do in a classroom could be adjusted into a church setting as well. I mean, certainly a preaching series about this topic of stewardship, both from Old and New Testament perspectives, I think could be a great way to kind of start a conversation with a church, within a church. Did you
Okay,
find
so
what
I
you were
did
looking for?
find this first link that I was looking for, and it is denominational creation care resources for lots of different denominations.
Cool.
Many different denominations have like a creation care like thing that you can use, like a like I don't know why I'm not coming up with a good word, but uh like a group, like they have like information that you can use that's specific to your denomination. And so maybe you would find your denomination on that list.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to show. And then I will also give you this article that came out this week about Jesus and how he didn't want food to be
Oh,
wasted.
perfect.
Yeah.
Hillary, our fearless behind the scenes BioLogos rep back there, included a comment that she once went to a church where one of their creation care efforts was to have everybody drink their coffee out of mugs instead of styrofoam cups, which is such a easy thing. If it's bring a mug from home or go to Goodwill and buy a bunch of very cheap used mugs and use those to wash instead of all of the cups of all of the coffee that we drink at church. Oh, great. Any last questions? Now would be a great time to throw them in the chat really quick. I know Maureen and I could sit here and talk about ideas all day long. And like I said, we've got that very long handout that is both in the chat and will be in a follow-up email to for you to peruse at your leisure. It looks like those are our questions. So I'm going to wrap us up here with sharing just a few little housekeeping things about Integrate for you. At BioLogos, when we think in our education programs, the primary piece of that is this Integrate curriculum that we're really excited about. But fundamentally, the goal of our education work at BioLogos is not to sell a curriculum, but to support educators and parents and ministry leaders in helping youth think about science and faith in engaged and productive, respectful ways. And so we just really want to help you do that however we can. And there's, in addition to the curriculum, there's a lot of other ways, other things that we offer along those lines. So if you're interested in staying kind of up to date with what we're doing in science and faith and education, we've got a newsletter that you can sign up for. If you go to our website, biologos.org/integrate, and I believe scroll all the way to the bottom there on that homepage, you'll find the newsletter sign up. And if you do sign up, you'll be automatically sent a free digital copy of Unit 1, which is just great. So you should, do that. We send out a monthly email newsletter that includes a lot of a resource roundup. So sort of interesting articles and resources that we found in the last month around science and faith and the classroom stuff. We also have a very active Facebook group. If you search for BioLogos Integrate on Facebook, you should find it. We've got a community of a couple hundred teachers and homeschool parents and parents who are there and just want to be talking with their kids about these topics, exchanging recommendations, asking questions, getting ideas. So please come and join that group and get involved in that conversation. And if you're involved in a school or a co-op or some sort of other professional capacity, we also do professional development workshops that you can look into on our website, things that everything from how to create an environment in your classroom for gracious dialogue when you might have a range of different views on a topic and you as a teacher need to navigate through that, to resources about the range of Christian views on origins and how, if you're a school leader like a principal, you can help guide your school through a sort of institutional new approach to thinking about science and faith, because that can be hard in a big organization like a school. So check that out. Those are available virtually or in person. And we even have grant funding to pay to come to schools to run those. So if you're part of a school where there's not a lot of funding for professional development, that need not be a problem. So check it out. And there's all sorts of other articles, podcasts, that kind of stuff on our website, biologos.org/integrate. And it didn't pop up. There we go. Just in case you're interested, you can use the promo code webinar20 for an extra 20% off purchasing anything, any part of the curriculum if you're interested. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming. And the one thing that would be so, so, so valuable for us is if you could take a quick survey and tell us a little bit about your experience in this webinar. This is a little bit of a new thing for us. We're trying to do them quarterly and make them as useful and beneficial to educators and parents as we possibly can. So there should be a link to that in the chat right now, and we will send out a link to it in our follow-up email. But please, if you could take 5 minutes to fill that out, that would be a huge help to us. And it's totally anonymous, but if you choose to add your email to it, we will draw somebody to win a free book here. This is a book written by a group of professors at Wheaton College for a class that they take or that they teach called Understanding Scientific Theories of Origins. And it is just it's a tome. I'll warn you, but it is a rich resource of all sorts of different information about how we look at cosmology and biology and geology and put these things together to explore the different perspectives of origins within the Christian community. So it's a fun one. So if that's of interest to you, please take our survey. All right. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's been great to have you here. And if you have any other questions, feel free to stick around for a few seconds and chat with Maureen and I. But otherwise, thank you for coming and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mhm.